So that is a pipeline that is busted and is flooded the neighborhood and is going all the way to the drain at the end of the street. Luckily, our house is here, which is seemingly unaffected, but the smell is unbelievable. I mean, look. Incredible. And that is oil.
Two things can be true at the same time. It can be true that pipelines are the safest way to move these products underground. It can also be true that in this case, mistakes were made by people. Anything that humans touch is subject to error and mistakes, and that's what we had.
How far is this going to go, and how permanent is the damage going to be? We didn't have a pandemic during my 8 years. We had our share of disasters, whether it was an ice storm or many tornadoes or floods. I mean, we had that 2011 flood that was a historic 100-year flood. But you're right, we never had a pipeline rupture oil spill.
It flowed from approximately 2:45 when it was discovered by a homeowner to after 3, and I want to say almost 3:30.
Mayflower Police Chief Robert Sitkowski says it's not clear why the pipeline ruptured, but it was later shut off by Exxon. The spill prompted evacuations as cleanup crews tackled some drainage areas in town where the oil flowed to. Along Highway 89 across from Lake Conway, crews sealed off 2 pipes under the road to keep oil flowing from a city drainage pond into the lake.
Now, I'm just over here trying to make sure that we get it stopped before it gets into the lake.
The initial thought was, how bad was it? And how do we stop the spill? You've already got some spill, but we've got to stop the continuation. How far is it going to go? And are there other weaknesses or areas in this line that we need to be worried about immediately?
I have been reminded by Exxon's representatives that this is a relatively small spill. I hope that they realize that to the homeowners in this area, it is not small, it is catastrophic.
Arkansas's top law enforcement officer, Dustin McDaniel, put boots on the ground Wednesday to evaluate the damage from Friday's oil spill.
That neighborhood was like a scene from The Walking Dead. There were still Easter decorations on homes, but there was not a soul in sight other than people in hazmat suits.
All of the good stuff that's been done in terms of cleaning it up doesn't make up for what these folks, these displaced folks, have had to go through. I remember this episode of my life very, very well because I poured probably more hours into that, dealing with that oil spill, than any other event or issue during my time in Congress. You were dealing with people's lives and their emotions, possessions, just the routine of daily life, of getting up and taking a shower and going to work and having kids play in the yard and all of those things, because they were completely displaced.
Now you're telling me that the damage is so severe that we need to be evacuated for 2 to 3 weeks, and yet when their so-called cleanup efforts are done, we're just supposed to take our kids back out there and say play in the street. Go ahead and ride your bike, baby. Go ahead and rollerblade out there.
Exxon and the EPA say they're monitoring air quality, but warn residents with asthma or other breathing disorders to see a doctor. And resident Darren Hale says there are immediate concerns, like when can residents return home?
The first one was 2 days, the second one was a week. Now I get here and find out 2 weeks. Finally, after talking to Representative Hounsey, no one knows.
I was getting phone calls from people saying, I've got headaches. So So then I was calling the epidemiologist over at the Department of Health to say, hey, have y'all been looking at this?
Nick Brescia with the EPA says over the last 2 weeks, air quality samples consistently improved. Crews, meanwhile, cleared the soil around the pipeline and located the 22-inch long rupture. Exxon officials say they must remove the broken section for analysis to figure out how the spill began.
We got to get the oil out. We do have approval from the DOT to proceed with the excavation of the pipeline. We all have one objective. It is to continue to protect the health of the community, the safety of the community and our responders, and to get the oil out of the environment.
They were also concerned about the effects that it was going to have on a recreational and fishing lake, which affected even more people. They fished in it, they boated in it, they swam in it.
As soon as we heard about it, we had a couple of employees that headed over immediately to where that ditch where the oil was going, and then that was an inflow into a cove of Lake Conway. Just quick thinking, headed over with a track hoe and was able to create an earthen berm, sort of a dam there to sort of staunch that flow of oil almost immediately. There was some concern early about the marine life there, the fish in the lake, the birds and other wildlife, even some mammals that use the shoreline getting into the oil.
Volunteers are washing and warming the wildlife,
making sure that they're the proper temperature and that they're out of shock. And then we use Dawn and we bathe them.
The quick fix will be washing the animals, but over time,
you don't know the long-term impact of the absorption of oil into their bloodstream through their skin.
You know, Arkansas Game and Fish works with a lot of partners, the forest industry, the oil and gas industry. It's definitely a balance, and you know, our job is, if something does go wrong, we need to be there to help where we can.
We knew that in some of those houses, the damage was going to be so permanent, they're going to need to raise them, which they did.
After the Exxon pipeline ruptured in March, oil seeped into the foundation of these homes. Last month, the homeowners sold to the oil company and moved out of Mayflower.
It was determined that demolition would be an efficient and effective way to remove all of that oil from beneath the foundations.
ExxonMobil tells us all of the homes in this neighborhood are safe and only decided not to resell these 2 homes over the pipeline easement.
Ultimately, the objective is to make sure that there are no homes on a pipeline easement. What we're trying to do is to move forward, and I know the neighborhood wants to move forward.
What lessons can we learn from this pipeline that applies all around the country? I'm a firm believer in pipelines because we've seen what happens when you move hazardous material above ground. But they're the safest way as opposed to rail or driving beside you at a high rate of speed on an interstate.
I think we got through it about as well as could be expected. But there were times during that you just felt for those people who were displaced. Their children, you know, they didn't understand why the neighborhood where all their friends were was off limits to them.
Fortunately, the numbers were small. You don't ever want to see, you know, anything like that happen. But, you know, I think we can look back now and say it could have been much worse, and we're certainly glad that it wasn't.
Thank you.